Welcome to episode 5 of the Rocketwoman Show. Today I'm joined by a friend of mine, hence the living room here. And Vanessa and I have known each other for a couple of months, so it's not a super long connection that we've had so far, but enough to have me inspired to want to learn more about her and share her with you, with my universe. So Vanessa and I speak about embodiment practices, the importance of resilience, coaching. She calls it compassionate self-leadership and resilience for the restless. So a lot of stress management, a lot of practices, how to release stress in the body and to become a very embodied human being that is centered and well-balanced. And she has to share a lot of experiences in the podcast. It was a long conversation, but I'm so glad we had it. Maybe there are a few things that you can take into your day to day and take it as an inspiration. Next week, I'm joined by a friend of hers, again in the universe. If you've joined me for a few times now, you know what the drill is with the Rocket Woman. And yeah, next week, Friday, I'll speak with a friend of Vanessa's, and I'm really curious to meet a new friend then. You take care, and I hope you enjoy this one. Bye. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to episode 5 of the Rocketwoman Show. And as you see, I'm in my living room, which means that this is an episode that I'm recording with one of my connections. And the connection that I've invited for all of you to hear today is Vanessa Schulz from Düsseldorf, from my home city. We're going to do you a favor and not do this in German. Hi, Vanessa. It's such a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Vanessa and I don't go way back as the other connections that I've had on the show so far. We've only just met each other for, I think, 2 months or something. So it's pretty new. We're pretty new. And but still, I thought that this would be the perfect situation for me to already introduce you to my audience, Vanessa, because I think you are such an inspiration. And maybe you'll just say a little bit more about yourself. Probably better than me looking for words here that are appropriate.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it really feels like this quality of relationships that's like even if it's just blossoming, it feels like, oh, there's this space full of potential, right?
Mhm.
It's just like, oh yeah, somehow it works, and we're there, and I'm excited to be here and honored that, well, that you invited me. I said that already. So, well, I live in Düsseldorf, which is where I grew up. And it's not so long that I just came back. So I've been traveling for a couple of years. I still don't have an apartment of my own, which is why you see this nice thing behind me. It's borrowed by my lovely landlord. And yeah, so I've been a bit of a what people call digital nomad. I wouldn't call it that because I've always tried to live locally, and I've traveled for a bit and studied life and myself and what I studied in the end. And it kind of like all interweaved with each other, and came back just recently into like left my bubble of embodiment coaching, of learning how to be an embodiment coach and doing all the specializations that I did there and working with groups. And now very much to bringing what I learned there into well, a more average type of reality, an everyday type of reality, and see how that is actually actionable really for people that have a normal life. Yeah. So.
Yeah. That's you in a nutshell, right? So it's always difficult to sort of cram all of the goodness into a few sentences. But yeah, that's also how I absolutely enjoyed meeting you. It's that thing that really drew me to, digging deeper with you into the whole embodiment thing. Because I mean, this is not just a spiritual podcast or we don't just talk about those things. I think it's really important to address how we can sort of ground all of those things that we experience in life, where it's just about the wisdom of like being in that space of wisdom. And I think you've just done this little exercise with me as we were getting going. centering me and just grounding me to just make sure that we can be here in the body and have this connection, because sometimes, you know, it's so easy to just be all over the place in these conversations, right? So you're working as an embodiment coach. What drew you to that? What was your story behind that?
Yeah, that suggests that it was intentional, which it wasn't. I think I was just looking for answers and how it happens in those situations. At some point, I just fell into a rabbit hole that suited me very well. And it was the one of the embodiment conference, which is what my later then mentor, he did it when summits were still cool. It's not too long ago, but it feels like ages ago. And it was an online summit with, I think it was more than 1,000 sessions out of 10 or 11 different disciplines that, like, I heard of the disciplines, but I would have never thought that there was kind of like a connective glue to it. And I somehow stumbled into that and watched like stuff about trauma and stuff about like how it is to be in the body. And I wouldn't even say that it made sense right away, but I was just so hooked. So the claim of this was come home to your body.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt a bit like a fraud because I wouldn't know what that would mean. Like I never felt that there was this connection. Like I can rest in my body. I can be my body. I am comfortable the way that I am. I was very much of a heady person. Like we all carry our histories and our lives, and that was my main way of doing life, was being in my head and trying to control all stuff, and everything that I met that could have brought me closer to my body did. And then I tried to overdo it, like yoga. Who didn't experience it, like, oh, there's some magic in this. And then it's like, let's do more of that until I'm full of magic every day. It doesn't really work that way, right? But no one tells you in the beginning. So yeah, I was kind of hooked. And then I followed Mark's work a little bit. Mark Walsh was the one initiating that. And I found that he was actually a coach, and that he was educating coaches. And it was not only about embodiment, but just like having an idea of, well, there's this layer of life, of like of human experience that, again, this sounds way more sorted out than it felt. It felt quite chaotic, but just understanding that there is a whole way of experiencing life that I had connected to yet, that I didn't know about. And there were so many new things to experience, and to wow, I never had that feeling. Wow, I never related to things like this. And also some like overarching understanding of, there's a system. Oh, this is how we work. Oh, this is why I behave that way sometimes. I'm not like, this is not a failure, like me being a failure, but there are dynamics, and I have a hardware, and I have history, and there's like some coding imprinted now in the hardware, and I can kind of like redesign that to a certain degree. And so I said already the word rabbit hole, and I, like, after 3.5 years of doing that full time and with like almost devotional, I would say I still learn every day. And yeah, that's like, how would you say embodiment other than how it is to be as a body instead of being in a body or having a body, something like. It's like, really, this is all part of. There's this I wish I had his name handy. I might just like give it to you later. There, it's basically, it's a colleague, and he has been teaching on one of the courses that I assist on, and he does a lot about authentic relationship and authentic listening. And I love how he says that, because he does work a lot with corporate people as well. They need a little bit of a different language, which means that be very clear on that. And he would say in the beginning of a session, usually, like, I just want to make sure to sit here with the whole of you. And I just love that, because it's the essence of what embodiment is about for me.
Yeah. And that, I mean, embodiment in itself, it has so many connotations, right? And I think that's the difficult part about these conversations with a little bit more of a consciousness, awareness / energy background, that we easily get distracted by the label on the jar, right? Rather than looking at what is the content here, and tuning into the way that you're that you've just described, embodiment, is really beautiful, because it really makes me see how you want to live that, and that, you know, you come from something that is very heady now into something that gives you enough, that gives the head enough food to stay hooked, maybe, or to stay focused on this, right? While something is being pulled out of you, and that is presence, right? And that part of presence is that part of going into connection. And we're looking for those connections within each interaction that we're having. But the last place that we start looking for that connection is within ourselves, right?
When you were just saying that, I had to rub my belly. I was just like, oh, what am I doing? It's like, yeah, it's like really like coming to what is my truth. And I wouldn't be able to plan that somewhere. I wouldn't be able to just like take some words and make them mean something. Like the meaning is something that happens in the body. All emotion is something that happens in the body. And it's so connected to the sensoric level. It's not like one or another thing. It is one layer or one perspective of wholeness, that if we leave it out, yeah, I think like there's so much, there's people that are more on the neurological side of it, and more on the trauma, field of trauma work. I think, was it Porges? But there was one of the huge names on trauma research, like from the 90s. I think it was Porges, saying that 80% of the information coming, like the neural information that is being transferred in the body, is coming from the body to the brain. So basically about this connection, there's so much information that we pick up on, and we could never handle all this information. So it's kind of like translated into something very fuzzy, which could be just a response to something, or it could be an intuition, recognizing something that we know already. And it leaves us with an imprint of, oh, this is an emotion here, because that's kind of like a quick way to understand, like, oh, this is where I'm at. Like, we're constantly understanding our environment, constantly like picking up on all the stuff with all the five senses, and also with well, to be, I'm starting to get nerdy here. I'm sorry.
That's fine. Go ahead.
So
Rabbit holes. Love it.
Interoception, and this is not scientifically super detailed the way that I share that, but it's good for general understanding. There's something called interoception. We have so many little receptors, like also making sure that we know where we are in space, that where my arm is in comparison to the rest of my body, and like, do I hold my hand up or down? So all these little bits of information that constantly flow in our bodies. But we also we perceive other people's nervous systems. We perceive you could say it like super profane, saying like, when you come into a room where everyone just had a fight, you know instantly that you want to leave that room. Right? It's nothing that they said. It's maybe not even an expression on their face, but it's something that you just like, you pick up the whole thing, and you have this like very fuzzy and not exact, and also not what's the word, explicit information. And what the way that I work, like embodiment coaching, uses somatic awareness as a basic tool. So it is about like being aware, what am I doing in my body? Am I tensing up somewhere? Like, what's my posture doing? What is my body actually telling me? And not actually even interpreting it, but just like observing, having like establishing a new language, picking up on this one huge layer that we have about information, and just learning to connect with that, learning to understand, oh, this is how I behave in a certain context, whatever that context is. Could be with myself, could be with others, could be a specific situation, and learning to become aware of that is eventually creating choices. So that's like, it's not that we always follow our autopilot and always do the same, but I could notice like, oh, this is somehow stressing me, and I know this because my belly's tense, or I shrug my shoulders or something. I could widen my shoulders instead. I could loosen my belly. And my whole way of seeing the world, my whole way of relating to the world and to myself will change within an instant. And that's just, you can just like always try that, and it's really, it works every time. And every time it works, it's like a little miracle. And it's like, even for me, I do this quite a lot. It's always like, oh, I forgot about that.
Yeah, it's like, oh, but why do I keep forgetting about this? It's like the simplest of exercises, right? I think sometimes we as human beings, we just want it to be difficult, right? And you talking about this really makes me see the importance of just observing my own body, the way that I inhabit this meat suit, right? Because we're taught that this is just the body, and then you've got the mind, and then you've got, maybe, at some point you add the spirituality to it. So you add, or you compartmentalize it into these departments where you just go like, oh, this is the body, and if I'm just trying to, that's that oftentimes. And here I'm jumping again. Like, that's how I can tell when I get excited about a topic, because I go, I don't care if you can follow me. I'm just like, this is the rocket going off. But allowing the body to be the piece of intelligence, that's what stuck with me in what you just said. The way that I was raised, it was like, okay, this is the body, you kind of have to feed it, and have to take care of it to some extent, but it's not a nice thing to pay too much attention to. And then you just go into the mind, and then you've got this whole heady part, like what you explained in the beginning, that's just so easy to put the main focus on, because it allows you to perceive and observe as well. How would you describe the difference of the physical observation with the body intelligence versus the mental intelligence, the mental observation?
Well, both are liars, I would say, and both are sources of truth. So we do need words, right? If I want to learn how to ride a bicycle, I should know what a wheel is, where I find it, and what is it basically doing. And it might be helpful to have some examples of doing that, and to have some structure to follow. We always need structure to be able to do things, which is usually like the cognitive part of what we do. And then again, I need to experience in my body the sensation of pedaling. I need to experience, like, it's a different level of learning. We need all of these. I need to experience, how does it feel to hold balance? Which parts of my body do I have to engage to have this body of a confident bicycle rider? How would I learn to ride without holding my hands on the steering wheel, right? So this kind of stuff is something that you can't learn that from books. You cannot learn that from explanations. But also, if you don't know what a bicycle is for, well, you probably wouldn't do anything about it. If no one would tell you, now, please go, we all do it as a group. There are so many factors to learning and to experiencing life. And another thing is that we need words to discern what we understand in the body. So we do need to make it workable. We need words as well. If we come to personal development or to working with trauma, and I have to say I'm well trauma informed. I have a proper education, but I'm not a trauma therapist. I'm not a therapist at all. I'm a coach, which means that and trauma happens in the body. So it's crucial for me to understand, okay, this is safe to work. This person's resourced enough to be challenged on that, because we do work with the stress response in the body. And yet, like, I would stabilize and then probably refer when it's about trauma. But we all have some sort of, let's say, small trauma, right? It's part of the human experience to have some things that leave an imprint, and that kind of put us into this repetitive thing where we are standing in our own way, probably. And it's really hard to draw a line. How complex is that? In which parts of our lives is that important and stuff? So let's say I would work with a person that learns how to hold negative emotions. If it's always like emotions also come with layers. When you learn how to sit with sadness, you might then be able to, okay, where in my body would I feel the sadness? So translating it from the emotional to the sensoric level allows for leaving, for not being overwhelmed by the emotion. And then seeing, okay, this is an emotion. It's a bit of a meditating about that, but It's just easier because you don't have to control your thoughts, which is not always possible, and it's more practical. So having done that, then you can go and see like, oh, is that maybe some anger? What is that? Is that frustration? Is that resistance? Is it some, do I feel lonely? Do I feel not big enough? Do I feel like, what is the thing behind that? And it's easiest to discern that. Well, we need words to discern that. And to do that work, it's easiest to go on the body because it's then on a sensory level. It's also very important to not only stay in the body, both for working with painful things and also to work with pleasure, because we could say like, oh yeah, if I only follow my intuition, if I'm so creative, I need to be my body completely. But how would I regulate that? How would I know how I want to be, how I want to show up in situations? How could I be intentional in situations that stress me? I couldn't, right? I would just like follow. As soon as I am too enthusiastic, as you just said, like, oh, the rocket goes off. We don't even have to be like triggered in the sense of something bad is happening. We could be excited for something good. We could be falling in love and we're becoming idiots, right? It's pleasurable, but it's just basically like you're maybe not showing up as you want with your responsibilities. And stuff. And working with both, bringing the body and the mind and the emotion, like not both, but all three, bringing this together, and while not ignoring either of those levels. I think this is crucial for self-leadership, for general self-leadership. So yes, I can like give myself some slack here. I want to enjoy that. I decide I'm giving myself this range of behavior because I've created that as a container. And then I know on Monday I can work and I can go to fulfill my responsibilities, right?
But all parts are online.
Yeah, like unless there is an addiction, I don't have to have like 8 glasses of wine just because the first one was tasteful, right? So I don't have to have all the burgers. I don't have to date all the pretty guys. I have like, even if we talk about nice things and pleasurable things, embodiment is not about hedonism. It's important to, or I think it's just for human experience. It's so beneficial. It's so enriching to be able to step into pleasure and to be able to step into play and spontaneity. And again, life is not only that. So being able to understand, like, how am I? What is really important to me? I can check in with my body. Being able to discern between a trauma response or between I'm stressed, so I'm going for that. And this is really my inner truth. That's super subtle. And again, like if I learn this language, then I can find the answer in the body. So that's like really connecting to inner truth. And I think learning how to do that, like following that or finding ways which are almost individual for everyone. How does that work today for me? Like I still cannot connect with my body or with like my truth the same way every day. I have to check in with myself. How am I? What would I need today? And to which degree can I connect with that? Sometimes I have to go for an hour walk. Sometimes it's okay to just do a quick centering, right? And sometimes it never comes. And that's okay.
And that's, I love that because I think it really puts the attention of, we are all so individual and not only individually different from others, but also individually different from each moment. Like, you know, I think, again, it brings me back to the importance of self-leadership, right? What you've also just mentioned, because you can find guides helping you along the way, a support system. And, you know, I've been a coach for a really long time now. But for the longest time, I was really hesitant in using the word coach, because for me, it's not a word that really describes what I do. And I've just recently added the word guidance to it. I'm a guidance coach. I can be somebody that can help you, you know, deal with whatever situation you're in where you need a little bit of support. But ultimately, the goal has to be that you find that within yourself so you can guide yourself, the self-guidance. And I really want to pivot a little bit here into the future, you know, like looking ahead, looking at what systems don't work anymore. Because the reason that you and I can talk about this is because, you know, others have come before us that paved the way. There's enough information out there nowadays that can help us see things a little differently, right? Deal with our traumas, deal with the stuff that maybe other generations have not been able to deal with in to the extent that we can now. And that's a luxury. I'm very aware that, you know, not everybody has the safe space to do so, or you know, like any other resources that you need in order to really fully be present with those transitions.
And yet
So
all of them, sorry to interrupt, but yet all of them, all of our parents have been breaking their own cycles, right? The
yeah,
best way that they could. They have all done their work the best way that they could. It's just, yeah, fully agree.
yeah. And we'll just take it from here and look into the future, especially if you want to work in corporate, or if you want to contribute with your expertise or your qualities in society, even, you know, no matter what kind of job you have, or no matter how you live, how can we change those old structures, not only within ourselves, which happens automatically when you're on that journey of personal development, but how can we change it in the bigger structure of the business world, for example? What are your experiences there?
Wow, that's a complex thing. I think I might need some years to figure that answer out.
There's no time
So,
constraints on this show, so
yeah. Funnily enough, just a couple of weeks ago, I've been to a trade fair in southern Germany because I love this topic so much. It's all about new work, and it's a huge part of the new work philosophy is to create workspaces that feel fulfilling, purposeful. There is autonomy. There is a lot of like ability to self-lead oneself to. There is relevance. So all the good things, right? And that's the idea of it. But how to create that in normal corporate structure, and just some of that is like there's different levels that I've found are kind of like main pillars on that. So one would be the formal structure, kind of like, okay, what about workspaces? Where are they? Where should they be? What about the working times? Like, how much does a person have autonomy to decide on that? And how much freedom? It's always in the end about like freedom and boundaries, right? So what's the limitation? How much space do I have here? And new work works a lot with taking away those boundaries, those limitations, but only in some of the application where it applies. So for many, that has become like the space of work and the time of work. Sometimes also like, do I have to be in a meeting, or can I use a Slack channel, let's say? So this would be structures. Do I have the let's say technical infrastructure to work at night? If I'm a parent, could I work like after 9, right? How can I communicate with other people in my company? These would be more formal structures, I would say, that hold a lot. Informal structures that hold so much are culture. How is that lived? Like, are the values clear? How are they being lived up to? So I've just this week I actually had a coaching session with the second coaching session with the small company, which they're just the loveliest people. They're software developers, and they're consultants in that field as well. And they take all the time. They always like constantly. They know everything, not everything, but most things that are urgent in their employees' lives, and they take time and they engage and take care. And they were like, yeah, the employee is our most important resource, and we would put all energy into like, that's our most important value, that we keep them great, and we give them all space to educate themselves and encourage them. I was like, great, which measures are you actually doing? And they said, what do you mean by measures? And it was like, so how do you do that? And it's like, and that again depends on, is it formal, is it not formal, is it culture, or is it trainings that you give them? Is it that you go for a lunch date with each of your employees to give them some space to just get seen and heard? So you have this on a communication level. Is it that you live up to your own values and that you model them, which might be the most crucial thing for a leader in that position, right? So if I tell my team all the time, like, oh yeah, but please watch your mental health. And at the same time, I work for 14 hours. I never get to sleep. They would never go home after 8 hours, especially if they like the atmosphere around that. So that's a bit of a trap, right? So that goes together. If I take away boundaries somewhere, if I take away, the boundaries are also protective. If I take away those boundaries and limitations from, let's say, yeah, you can choose how much you work this week, then I need to give more information. I need to replace those boundaries internally. So they couldn't just like get a fast car. They would need to learn where the brakes are. And something like excitement. And if I want to be part of a great team and everything's creative and now I have a lot to say, this momentum leads us to not see where our own limitations are. When am I not resourced enough anymore? So that again, there is culture, there's the formal structures, and then you have leadership, the more protective or more directive or whatever type of leadership you have, and you have self-leadership. And somewhere in between all that is the answer that I can't give you.
It has to be fluid, right? Because I think ultimately, and it's hard enough even on a very individual personal level, dealing with all of those older parts of me. I call them aspects, right? Or the parts of me that are already pretty aware. So those would be facets. So even internally to have like loose boundaries or loose structure, but still enough guidance within. And I can imagine that it always has to do with, if you just give the authority to only if you lead from the behind or if you lead from the front, there's like totally different ways of results that you would even achieve with that. Like, are you pushing or are you pulling, or are you in the middle, and therefore it becomes stagnant? So I think that's where consciousness and awareness is absolutely necessary for any way of sustainable business for the future. And that leaves the question, how aware is each individual? But you can't make that a prerequisite, right? If you go into a company and you go like, oh, okay, whatever used to be like the they would have the evaluations in the past, like say in the 90s or whatever, and you would do your disc training or whatever. It's like, oh, but I only want those people. That's also not the answer.
No, you
right?
need diversity. You need all elements always, right? And it's also like depending on the topic, depending on how the group is put together. If you work with a team, the roles will be taken on differently. Because again, like you can work greatly with embodiment like this. So for instance, when we do workshops with other coaches, just to create this awareness, this is something that's quite triggering. So I wouldn't recommend to do this at home or at work with your teams, but you could like put them all in a line, just randomly take 5 people out of, like take 4 groups. When you have 20 people, you create 4 groups of 5, and then you'd say, who is the most structured one? Just like without talking, build a line of people. And then you would find people like knowing, like instantly, okay, I'm maybe the lead here in this one group, and another one would be a totally different person, right? So again, context, we're super contextual. I think ultimately we have to have a systemic approach on that. And on one part, we need awareness of the system. And on the other, we need awareness of every part of the system, which is also like, who's the leader, who's the employee, how much like the self-leadership. I think that the first base that we need to, or the basic thing that everyone needs for themselves is a good amount of self-awareness, and something that I must refer back to Mark, because he did this great teaching on that in his trauma stuff. So there's if you have this system of red flags and yellow flags. So wherever we have stress, always shows in the body in various perspectives. So you could see a physical response, which is like what we do a lot with the bodily awareness. There is always a body to it, but it's not the most obvious for people, especially when we're used to push through, right? So that's something like, yeah, of course, I can't stop right now. So, and then like, how would I spot when it's too much? I couldn't. So we have that. We have the emotional level, of course. So when I feel like I'm getting annoyed easily, I'm maybe less patient than I would usually be. That might be something like, oh, I could watch out for that if I understand that this happens for me. I feel more often like this when I become stressed. So this is something that I could call it a yellow or an orange or even a red flag. Like, when do I need to intervene and when do I have to maybe just keep an eye on it, right? Be aware. There is a social component. If everyone tells you you behave, let's say, like a duck, you might be a duck in that moment, right? So there's something about that. There's the behavioral one. So do you feel, what's your sleep doing? Like, how well do you sleep lately? Do you see yourself probably shopping more, having different behavior in when it comes to dating, when it comes to food, when it comes to sports or movement, right? Do you fall into any patterns somehow more? And there's a fifth, oh yeah, psychological. Like, do you get lost in thoughts? I mean, do you start overthinking a lot? Do you feel like you're stuck in that, or do you have to control everything a bit more? And it's sometimes really hard to, like, it's not all black and white. They kind of like all come together, and sometimes it's hard to draw a line, and it's not that important because this is not a school test, but we can use all this and create a system of, when I'm noticing this or this or this, or maybe I have a good friend that is kind enough to point out for me, like, hey, let's say I'm starting a project. I understand that this might be bringing me to my limits. This might like bring me to like where I really might have a hard time being a kind person, or just staying myself and feeling myself, right? I might ask a good friend or someone I trust, like, hey, if you notice me doing this and this and this, could you please tell me? Could you please point that out? So it's good to have some basic, let's say, manual of how do I function in some situations? How do I function when I'm too excited or too stressed? And then use that manual in as many ways as possible, right? So like, involve friends. Social commitment is so good. Like, making up some exit strategies and some safety nets with that, especially when you know this is going to be a challenging summer. When do I know I have to make a decision? I have to cut short here. So that's just having that would save so many good relationships, even with themselves,
but
right?
doesn't it, and I think this is for me the question, like, moving into the future, it's becoming painfully obvious that in any kind of system, we need more self-awareness and more self-reflection. And maybe when I started my journey 20 years ago, that was optional, right? That was like, there was still enough people in mass consciousness or in society where you could just get away with it and not self-reflect and just blame the outside. But I feel that we're shifting fast into it's not a luxury anymore. Like, we have to find ways of even making that mandatory, some form of self-reflection. And therefore I think that you do need like a manual. And even for the most aware person, we're still human beings. There's still days when I always blame it on Pluto or Saturn transits or whatever, you know. There's of course many excuses we can use.
Right now, is it Mercury or is it anyone else?
No, Mercury is direct until August, but Saturn is about to go retrograde and Neptune is about to go retrograde and Pluto is retrograde. So all of the outer planets, all of the bigger society planets that represent that. Therefore, I bet you we're going to have very interesting results, especially in the elections that are coming up and all of that stuff. So the outer planets are always the ones to blame for upheaval in in humanity. The personal planets like Venus, Mars, and Mercury are more like, it's very personal. But I think like even when I'm in a reaction, when I'm not having a good day, and only yesterday I was getting like, the more the day progressed, the more I got pissed off. And, I know that there are some situations right now in my life where, some things are shifting, and I'm noticing that my mind is having a hard time making sense of any of that. So I notice that that part of me is just overwhelmed right now, which is a clear sign that add something else on top of that, and you've got that explosive energy that wants to come forth. But I also don't, I think I've come to the point where I can take the judgment out of it and allow myself, okay, here is something that clearly irritates me. What do I need to facilitate a safe space for myself and for the other that's potentially impacted by my burst outburst? But ultimately, I think it's a good thing to have those things memorized. Like, oh, here's a manual with those 5 sections. Just check, 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 check. Ah, okay. In at least 2 or 3, and now there are these yellow flags. And if I react now and take care of them now, then they don't need to turn into red flags.
Yeah.
Do I understand that right?
Yes, and there's more to it a bit. But yes, basically that's it. So it's like nervous system wise, it's not that the nervous system is the only way to see it, but it's something that is like relatively clear to explain, and that's actually also something relatively clear to regulate. So talking about different levels of arousal, right? You can imagine having various states in your nervous system. One would be rest and digest, which we all love, right? It's like it's actually really after a good meal, or when we are in shower. It's basically every time we have those really good thoughts, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you relax your body, that comes together with a certain alignment, with a certain body tension, you're connective. It's easy to trust, it's easy to collaborate. If you engage a little bit more, which is again level of arousal, right? If I sit like this, I give my own body, my own nervous system some information, which is an upregulation into a different level of arousal. I could be more creative. I could be more fun. I could be more outgoing,
Mm-hmm.
or a bit less, right? And the body is helping me to get into that. Or like when I shift my body, it's very easy to shift the state as well, right? It's create the biochemistry. It goes both ways, but it's really hard for me to sit there and I'm going to create a different biochemistry. I'm going to create different thoughts, but I can sit like this, and it's going to create a different biochemistry that makes my whole system perceive a different amount of information, have a different focus on that, and evaluate that differently. So what I sometimes refer to is we might have a friend that tends to say always the same like funny thing. And on most days it's okay, but on some days it's just like too much, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not the friend. They say at the same time every day, but it's the context. It's us. It's our internal world. And it almost feels like a threat, and we respond to that differently. Probably don't respond, but we react in that sense. So that's a perfect example of that. If it would have been a different day, if your nervous system would have been, if your whole systems, all of these would have been on a different level of arousal, I would say, you would have perceived this like just with your hardware in a different, and would be like, oh yeah, that's a bad joke. And maybe it's not too funny, but yeah, it's that thing. It's okay. Right? We were more generous then. There is a thing of it's connected to the survival instinct that we have. I think most people have heard until now of the fight flight response stuff. So it's really connected to, is it a possible threat? And the more aroused we are, the more narrow all of this becomes, and the more this filter of suspiciousness is creeping in, right? So we is it really like, is there something that I could second guess here, right? That's coming in quite quickly. So we have that we're working with, which means that this, as I call a filter of suspiciousness that adds onto it, it creates that if I'm stressed and I have a similar impulse than when I'm not stressed, I will, the response that I create in my body and in my being will be disproportionate to what actually happens, which is kind of like, it's kind of like an easily escalating curve, right? So it will be way more difficult to regulate down from, I can almost not handle it, I feel stressed, is really difficult to regulate. But when I understand like small versions of that, what's that slight annoyance, I can easily regulate that. I can easily just say, I'm going to call you back in 5 minutes. Right? Go for it.
And that's also the ownership of that and the self-leadership. And something that comes to mind for me is I used to have panic attacks or anxiety attacks when I was younger. And whenever they would resurface along the way, because, you know, sometimes there are those moments that trigger that. Lately, I've been able to shift it with a body response, like going into movement, because what the mind then suggests is, okay, now I just need to, you know, like exclude myself from any kind of movement, and I just need to lie down or whatever. It's like the worst thing you can do. And I've noticed that if I catch it in time, I can really put my foot down and say like, fuck that shit, you know, no, not
Exactly
now.
what you just said. Catch
Yeah.
it in time. Catch
Yeah.
it before it's too big to
Yeah.
handle, right? So, and then you have an appropriate response, and that's basically what this somatic awareness helps to do. Because how do you catch it in time? It is because you understand not an emotion, but you understand somehow the world is accelerating. Or sometimes I don't know, I get heady, or something is like up. This is becoming big. Some fire is coming up. It's usually an upwards sensation that we have, but it's more, if you look into it like and make it explicit, it would be a sensoric thing that you notice in your body and you recognize it, and you have now learned to recognize it when it's small enough so you can catch it in time, and then you can work with it.
But how do you, and that could just be an interesting question here that I think I definitely have. How do you stop the mind from needing to label it? Because ultimately it doesn't matter, right? Like sometimes it can be good information, but mostly you then just start another loop of spinning.
Well, if you see it early and you respond to that and you regulate that, well, there's more to it. Like I will get to that in a second. But if you spot it early, your mind will not have these thoughts. If you regulate it, your mind will not go into spiraling. If you spiral, then your body will follow. And when you regulate your body, like you always, like you cannot shift just one thing. You always shift your whole self.
Yeah.
Right. And the more crucial thing, because this sounds a bit as if it would be engineering, it's not. So we cannot engineer ourselves into being shiny, happy people. We cannot engineer ourselves of never having anxiety attacks or panic attacks, or never being passive aggressive again, or having boundaries, right? We're too complex. There's too many things happening. We're not living on a Zen mountain somewhere where it's really beautiful, or on a lost island. We're contextual, picking up on so many billion impulses in a minute. We couldn't possibly regulate all these. So there's two important things that for me belong to self-leadership. One is the ability to bounce back, to regulate into either, depending on how I am, either a state that holds that on the edge, or even into like from there into a more relaxed state, and even maybe into relaxation, into becoming soft and weak, into accepting stuff. The skill of regulation back into being more relaxed, that's what we usually call resilience, right? That's what we can train. The other thing is that things still happened. And usually it's stuff that is still like somehow in the body. We did have all these hormones going on there. Where should they go, right? Regulation is something that, like the resilience, the regulation, myself, self-regulation, is something that I do before a meeting, before I have a presentation, when I'm about to get into a fight, when I'm about to collapse, when I procrastinate. But it's still like here. So it's basically, I'm buying myself some time to be able to process then, which is the second part of self-regulation, of self-leadership. I need to process whatever happened. I need to reflect on that. I need to see if I like what emotion comes up with that. How can I sit with that? How can I work on that? But I probably don't need to do it right before the meeting. I don't need to write in the supermarket when I'm in the confrontational situation, because I will be stupid as fuck, right? we lose up to like, there's various studies and there's not so many, like it's not super scientific, but there are some studies that suggest that we lose up to 20% like IQ points. They don't specify which ones, and it's just, but literally we're getting stupid. We don't find the good solution. We have the best answer after we come home. We all have experienced this a lot, right? So, why didn't I wish I would have said that, right? We just don't see many options how to respond. So what we can do in a stress situation, when we spot that early, specifically if it's a pattern that we always experience or that we often experience and that stands in our way, we can practice and almost habitualize to regulate ourselves into a space from which we can make a smarter decision, from which we can talk more considerate or more assertive, whatever we need to do. Show up a bit more like the person we would like to be in that situation. But we're borrowing this space. We need to give it space later to process. We need to work with that after.
Yeah.
Right? I cannot always go for an hour of a yoga class or for a run, but most of the times we need to have these process things in between. And that is what we do with self-care. Self-care is not only that, but it's a huge part of that. So this system of yellow and orange and red flags could also include some ideas of what is good for me. How do I respond to making music? How do I respond to going for a walk? How do I respond to going swimming? For many people, just like water over the head would be letting go of stuff, right? That's again, that's individual for the person, for the situation, like what is the trigger, and also how resourced am I? Sometimes I want connection, sometimes I want solitude, sometimes I want movement, sometimes I want stillness. Somewhere in those four, at least one of them will work. And then how intense do I need this? Which type of movement do I need? Should it be guided? Am I overwhelmed with, like, is my mental load like somewhere here? Then I may want to go into a yoga class that's guided. Someone please tell me what to do the next step. That would be so good. If it's something that I feel restricted, then it might be, or I feel stuck. The movement might be something that's more intuitive, something that's more flowy. I can play, I can start to improvise, right? So that if it's something where I feel I want connection, I might go into some forms of partner dance to let go. Or I could go into some group dance stuff if I want like belonging. So it really, in the end, it does come to how good do I write my manual? And we cannot plan that. We cannot always say, oh, if A happens, then B will work. But what we can practice is the ability to tune in with myself and to understand what would be helpful today. And maybe it's 3 things and I don't know which one, and I try all 3 and then I know.
Yeah, and that's cutting yourself some slack, right? To say, okay, I'll only know if I go into the experience. And I think just from self-observation, whenever a part of me that is in a huge resistance is confronted with, oh, now let's go for a walk, or let's choose to really sit with it. Like, that's the last thing that you'd want. But ultimately, that's where self-care doesn't, it's not that kind of Instagram self-care that you see. I just need to zip a pina colada for an hour on the beach, right? It's really, this is the work. And I think it's crucial that we make sure that we are in a good place, so that, whatever we bring to the table, to this big buffet called life, at least that part comes in with a little bit of a label of, oh, I've checked myself, right? Like, because I think that's really where the fork in the road is coming, that we're facing, where, some people who are really committed to and dedicated to their self-inquiry, they will go into one direction and the others won't. So when you go into companies or when you work with teams or corporate or whatever, do you see that there's a lot of resistance, or is it, what's your experience there?
That again depends. So first of all, not everyone wants to be super vulnerable with their colleagues, and that's very appropriate. So I cannot always go quite that deep. Second, it's also like what is asked here. Let's say I do a resilience training. And if I do a very general resilience training, then I do want to work with the stress response of the body, right? Which means I have to trigger them. I have to stress them. And there's so many fun ways for me to stress them. Right? So, but it also like it can depend on so many things. It can depend on how long is the workshop, how deep can I go? How was the group? Is there hierarchies in the same group, or are there maybe juniors and seniors? There's different topics involved. Is it a space, like, is it somewhere outside? Is it somewhere which is like a contained space, which is usually better, but within the usual work environment? I had a training in London recently where they had like one of those huge shared office spaces, and they had a great room rented, a meeting room. But unfortunately, which no one thought about, and I didn't know before, and there wouldn't have been another option, so we just had to calibrate for that. There were huge windows, and people from other companies and offices would
were able to look
by. So one exercise that works really, really well, and it is like a bit ridiculous or easily ridiculous, so that's super sensitive to navigate. It's usually not that people sit there like this. It's more like they kind of like bring in ridicule, and then it's also like it's another avoidant thing. It's like, oh, I'm not engaging here. So, but one thing would be to, well, the thing is, you never know what triggers something in a person, especially when you work with the body. So it's really difficult to manage, to navigate certain topics, especially within a group that works together, because people do need to keep their distance with some stuff, and that's actually really good and appropriate. So I do try to work with more neutral stuff, and if the situation allows for it, there is an exercise by Paul Linden, which is throwing paper tissues. We could do that here. Actually have one here. Everyone who's super easily triggered, maybe don't watch the video or just like take a little like side thingy, but this should be all right. So if you're okay with that, I would try. What you do, right? Okay. So I have this paper tissue, and whenever you say, okay, I will throw it towards the camera, and you try to notice your response, if you respond at all. Okay?
Okay.
Okay. Did you do anything?
Maybe I blinked.
You blink. The blinking is like, this is why I'm talking about. It's not, no one has ever been attacked by paper tissues. So there is no trauma coming up. It's not very likely that I provoke anything like that. But the blinking is super normal, right? If I do it now without you knowing before, that might be something different. If I do it now coming closer or being like doing this, that might be different. So we can calibrate with different, there's a lot of things of how we can calibrate the intensity to hopefully keep people engaged enough so that they feel enough to work with it, but don't feel too much to go out. And the going out often is like, this is not working anyways, here's my phone, or like this one is one that people start giggling so much. And once one starts, the other one would, it's infectious. It's really difficult. And then again, like it's good if they know some basic centering. So I can say, hey, this is the response of your body trying to avoid the situation, right? So how can you ground yourself? How can you calm down? Because if you're nervous in front of before a presentation, you don't want to go into giggling. How can you, because you can't control that, how can you regulate your body there? So what basically happens is making one stress response visible, trying to translate this to a somatic layer to give them some cues, because everyone would notice the same thing differently in their bodies. Some notice their shoulders, some do something with that. We all do things. Face is important, belly, thighs, the pelvic floor. Do I engage that? Do I tense that up? The toes, do I put them into the ground? But there's one or two cues that are obvious for everyone. They will be different. So yeah, it's really difficult. It's not an easy question to answer. It's all about calibration in the end. So what is stressful enough for them to help them notice something, but not too much. One thing actually that does work quite well is having them explore how it feels to escalate. And again, like I'm giving some quite detailed examples here. Please don't necessarily do them at home. And please don't ever use them for coaching when you're not an experienced embodiment coach, right? So also like if you're a business coach, like, oh, I'm going to do that with people, please don't, right? A lot of things that you have to spot to make sure you don't lose people. It's not too easy to navigate. So, but basically, if you tell the same context or the same, let's say, being seen as a topic, as an overarching topic, you could be seen by sharing something intimate with your best friend sitting on your kitchen table in the kitchen, maybe even with a wine or with a tea, whatever suits you. So you would be pretty relaxed. You would be quite open. Your body would show that. You might be leaning back or even like doing this, right? But you're not armoring yourself. You're not avoiding. You're not like going away. You're being very present, and you're having a muscle tone that's maybe a 2 to 3 out of 10. You're not collapsed. You're there. You're feeling a lot, and you're maybe like talking with your hands like this. Maybe you're even moving a lot, but you're not like being very strict. So if you are being seen with something with your colleagues or in a more professional environment, you're still human, right? And you might talk about the weekend. But first of all, you're not going to be that vulnerable. And second, you will have a different body to it. You will be there will be more tension. You won't feel tense. It's not about feeling stressed or feeling tense. It's about having more tension in a way that is appropriate for you to hold you in that nervous system level activation, right? So you couldn't just like blurb out any personal stuff. You would need to be like, oh yeah, and this is, you have a more upright position, let's say, in your body. And to hold that, you need more muscle engagement. And then let's say you have an important meeting with a client that you don't know yet. You might be nervous. You are still able to handle that, but you might feel like, oh, I'm really like, something is stressing me. Like maybe I got wet hands, which is hard to regulate, I admit, but there will be something that you do with your hands. There will be something that you do with those tiny muscles in your face. There will be a lot of tension in your belly. You will very likely come forward or backward, right? So you will notice stuff in your shoulders, in your feet. You might notice that you're just pulling yourself together somehow, usually. That's a very common one. And then it might be that someone just says, oh my God, nothing's working here. I need you to step up and to take over this presentation. And you're not prepared for that. And you're just like, oh my God, I can't do it. I can't do it. I cannot do this. And you either panic and you go and you don't see anyone anymore in the audience, or you just freeze, right? Again, this is not super detailed and correct. Everyone who's familiar with the nervous system and the polyvagal theory, I'm aware that freeze is not the same, but it illustrates the escalation level of the same things. And
it's recognizable.
Yes, we all know that, right? So if we work with that, it's usually not that someone is really like deeply triggered, but it's more like they learn to navigate the intensity of where are they at right now. I like to look at stress as some form of movement in the body, right? Because it always starts like your response of being stressed has a 10% version of it, has a 30% version of it. You're moving into that. You're not just being that usually, right? Yeah, trauma excluded. but
of course, and that's also added on top of it, right? So rather than just being confronted with the now situation and handling or managing myself through it, there's usually the memory of, oh, you see that this is what happened, and then the mind just kicks into that as well. So it's like, you know, this definitely is a rabbit hole that I think a lot of people will recognize. And I love the simplicity of just saying, start paying attention, you know, on a good day, on a bad day, in every situation, as much as you can, just pay attention to how am I feeling here? what version am I bringing to this? Is this the highest expression I can bring, or what parts of me are still a little bit left behind, and then to gather that into the presence of it.
Yeah.
I want to talk to you about the trauma information, because when you explained, trauma-informed coach, not a therapist, I was thinking, I actually prefer the coaches that have gone through trauma themselves to the therapists that just, have gone through the teaching and the learning of it, or the studying of the material. How much of the embodiment is necessary to bring to your experience and to your wisdom, do you think?
All of it, I
Yeah.
think. So first of all, going through trauma is a thing that I think healing is a thing that, well, first of all, it happens in the body, but it's also a thing that is always contextual to where we are in life. So it's different if I talk to you on a podcast and I know that this is recorded. Thank you for that, which makes me more, it's so much easier, right?
Mhm.
But if I would be on a stage in life and there would be cameras and there would be maybe 1,000 people, then I would meet my patterns for sure until I had like maybe 50 of those talks, right?
Mhm.
So we
Mhm.
grow with the challenge. And we usually find that with, again, like I need to refer like most of this, like I had a lot of great teachers, but one of my main teachers and influences on this is Mark Walsh.
Mhm.
With Embodiment Unlimited. So it's not the only one out there, and he introduced me to many people, but a lot of the clarity of that is definitely on his shoulders. So that usually comes with the need to heal more, usually comes with either having more influence or more power, or becoming more intimate. Let's say you want to start a new relationship, you will meet your triggers in a different way, and you will, there's this image of an onion that we peel, and it's layer for layer, and this the spiral that we always like go into the next round and cycle, and there's many ways to tell the story, but that's basically it. So whenever we grow, then we kind of need to outgrow it, and we do that by meeting, oh, where do we have to work again? So that's the first thing. I think embodiment is, it was my only way to work with that. I do have a complex trauma history. And I did therapies since I was 17, like not too many of them, because at some point I was like, no, I'm not giving this any more space. And I think I did 2 when I was very young, and then I did 1 more when I was about 30, just because I noticed I would be super reactive, and I didn't have words for that, but I just felt like, oh, if I continue being that bitch, I will not have any friends and family hanging out with me anymore. And I was like, okay, I need to do something. And the go-to was therapy, because there were the times, right? I'm 42 now. So even 10 years ago, psychology was not at that point yet to have all this information. So I did that, and the therapies changed a lot as well. So many therapies have connection to the body in many ways. Also, coaching is different from therapy in a sense that we deliberately stress people to grow, which means they need to be at a certain robust level already to work with that. So in many ways, like there's even ways to work with trauma where it's super appropriate and useful to not go into the body, because it's not safe for the person to experience, which is, again, like, please, guys, girls, if you want to work in that field, educate yourselves. You can do so easily more harm than good. That's really tricky. And this is why everyone with a complex trauma history, they need the stabilization first. And it may be, depending on the person, may be good to stay in the head and to understand context first. So they have some distance to the experience before they go into the experience. And then they need to start befriending their body, or okay, that's a different topic than trauma. So I probably won't open up another one as well. But so to actually work with trauma, the body is crucial. And it's like, working with trauma has many different levels and phases and ways to do it. The way that I worked with mine was, well, basically I learned a lot. So I did have this this context that gave me orientation and knowledge, which was safe enough for me to like, oh, sorry, got a check-in here. So I still do my check-ins, by the way, after doing this after 3.5 years. So I do check in with myself. How do I talk? How do I sit? Am I hungry? Am I thirsty? Do I need movement? Do I need a break?
Yeah, reminders, right? Like
those.
reminder to
Yeah.
come back to it. Yeah.
Yeah, best way to learn it. So that I could just model that here. I still believe in that. It works.
This is not staged.
No, it's not. It's not. So thing is, well, we always like the body has a lot of dynamics or mechanics to deal with trauma. We are also built to deal with trauma. We are built quite resilient already. And depending on our resources, which could be our support system, like something in us always brings us to a certain limit. Unless we have complex trauma, that's a different way. But like, please go to a therapist that's suitable for you. And also, if you're watching or listening to this and you don't know what could be the next step, please do get in touch anyways, because I might just give you good advice.
Yeah.
So,
always reach out. Like, don't sit on it. Don't sit on it. No,
never. Because like it's super complex. It's super difficult to know what would be the best thing to do. And it might just be good to get some stability to be able to feel into what could be a good next step.
Yeah.
Okay, that being said, for me, so I had this context. I had a huge support group. I've been in a private mentorship, which means Mark was not like daddying me or something, right? But he would be like, if something was really crucial, I could reach out and say, hey, I'm observing this and this. Who can you recommend that I work with? Who can you recommend for me to go to? I did have a trauma education, which took more than half a year in an intense course with educated therapists. I did that twice even, because you always learn.
Yeah.
And first you learn in yourself, right? And easily get overwhelmed. So I had to repeat that one, because the more you learn, the more you see. It's really
and that's another thing. I think, like, when we talk about trauma and looking back to previous generations that were, in horrendous situations like war, and you don't have to go back generations. I mean, this is still happening, right? Yeah. It's probably a good thing that the awareness shuts off at some level.
It is,
right?
It is.
Yeah.
We couldn't handle that.
No, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, it's also, there's, you said you had some resistance to call yourself a coach. I had that too for quite some time, because people are usually like, oh, you have to go through crying. No, that's good. That's like a catharsis. No, fuck, it's not. You have no clue what you're doing there. Don't force people to cry. It's not good for them. It's like totally gambling, right? They can be lucky and somehow learn something from it, or you just like make it worse. If anyone,
and I think that's why the accountability of having a good training or having a good support group with that is so important, because we don't always see the bigger picture from our little perspective. And I think to really get feedbacks and to constantly be in the exercising of it, and to be in the exchange and interaction with it, that for me was crucial also, because through the feedback, I learned more about myself and learned more about, like, oh, okay, that's my biggest pain point is actually the point where I can help other people later, once I'm sort of through my stuff. That's where I can bring that. And I think that's why it's so important to talk about both, to talk about this is the container that we can offer to people that are still in it, and this is my experience with it. And I think that's where the ego needs to go through certain deaths or death cycles in order to be open and vulnerable enough to share from that perspective.
What have we healed enough to be able to responsibly not teach but guide from there, or coach? Because if not, we will always bring ourselves in. Just actually today I had I am not a teacher on that main course, but I am an assistant, so I get to supervise some of our new coaches of that school. And I've seen some beautiful coachings today, and there is especially people that facilitate or coach in a certain way. And you just said, like, I always kind of like appreciate when they have their own experiences. which is usually what brings us there. Because when we find answers, it makes things relevant, which is like, oh, this is meaningful to me.
Yeah.
It's dynamic. And knowing that can help for us to understand that we sometimes want the way of helping people it's such a slippery road to not do too much. It's to not like overpower them, your clients, there's this, it's such a subtle thing of like opening some space, see if they make a step, see if they can come up with something on their own, something that actually gives them the confidence of understanding, oh yes, I have this connection, I have this wisdom, I am my own authority. Or if they're not there yet, and that's fine, and then we can go there and just hold it, or give a hand and show them something, or hey, let's play, let's explore, let's see if something resonates. But learn the language, learn how to make a step slowly when you're safe enough, right? And not, oh, this is your solution, this is your like 5-step plan to get there. But really, like, I don't know anyone's truth. And embodiment, well, this is, oh God, this is leading one to another again, but yeah, maybe just because I had those sessions today, it's the body can be a bloody liar, as one of my dear colleagues said, Sarah Jones, he can lie like a bloody motherfucker, she said. And he can, because it's not healthy to eat 10 bars of chocolate. It's also not great to always run away. It's also not great to like always feel we go with familiarity many times, but it's also a big source of wisdom. And even just talking about something, my body will shift into doing something. Even if I talk about something I like, I will be like, oh, I will be more relaxed. I will have a more shiny open face. I will have a more relaxed gaze, which is those tiny muscles. And I couldn't manipulate myself to completely have these, but I can recognize, oh, now I'm relaxed. Now I know that I speak from the heart and not out of a response. Right? There is an inner calmness, and understand, yeah, body's just like, mwah, to work with. And you asked about embodiment and working on trauma. And I think, well, one very big point on trauma is that there is the idea of I am powerless in a situation.
Yeah.
Right? There's this like, I cannot do anything about this. And this is oftentimes, like sometimes it's something terrible that happens now. And oftentimes it's like with the everyday trauma that we all carry, we've just been tiny. We probably couldn't do that. So one question that we sometimes ask when doing some sort of trauma coaching is like, how old are you now? And we're like, oh, I'm 5 years old. I'm 10. I'm this little person. And we're just like, this is the reality that our biochemistry, that our whole system creates. It's a reality. It's not like I'm making this up. It's not the story. It's my body goes into that reality. And what the trauma basically is, the trauma response is, so I recognize that whatever happens, I've seen this before, the most appropriate way, or I recognize this from there. And the most appropriate way to respond is what I did back then. To create safety. And unless we do create safety and a sense of I can handle this, we will not end the cycle. And this is what, again, please don't name me on the scientific details because there's no space for this now. But just to get the idea, just saying this, that dog didn't bite me because it was on a leash. That tells my system I don't have to repeat that cycle constantly. It's also, some people call that integration, or some schools call that integration of the stress response. And then basically that's the idea of one way of like how to interrupt that cycle.
But it's so important to have another interactional point there, right? And to voice it even. And I noticed that when I'm going through something, how important nowadays, or how easy it can be to just include voicing something, even if I'm alone, to just talk out loud, right? And even that whole programming or conditioning of, oh, are you going crazy now? Or are you speaking with yourself? But I think paying attention to what voice can bring to the table, what making yourself a witness to it can do for you. So again, it comes back to self-observation, right?
No, it's also like it's re-engaging with your neocortex. It's re-engaging with the cognitive part of yourself. it is creating some distance to experiencing the story. So you're not like in the middle of it, you're also a little bit observing it. And that little bit of distance sometimes is enough to get like, oh, remind yourself, how old am I now? Oh, I'm actually grown up. Oh, this is not a bad situation. I can deal with that. Another thing is that the more we practice in the body an alternative, I do need an alternative strategy. I cannot take anything that works away and not replace it. It always needs a substitute.
Yeah.
And this is something that we have to learn. So when I talk about like working or coaching with trauma, it would be often people having being people pleasers, not having good boundaries, or not being able to rest because they think they somehow don't deserve it, or like not having an intention, but I'm not able to rest. I cannot just sit still. I just feel like there's something happening then. So this is something that I would typically work with. Like I love working with a team in corporate because I have my own history in having been overwhelmed at work and almost got into burnout, and it feels super relevant to me. I still do have some individual clients with some stuff. So that is something that we would typically coach unless there is a super complex trauma thing. And so we would do that by acknowledging what good is in that. Again,
Yeah.
this is
What's the good and the bad? Yeah.
there's so much good in it. So people that are constantly doing things, wow, they're durable. They get so much stuff done. People that are people pleasers are so kind. They really like people. I mean, they're also manipulative usually, and it's a strategy to oh, this might be super triggering to some. I'm sorry, but people pleasing is not only kind. Let's leave it there. There's some stuff in it which is, well, it makes it a strategy as well.
But to go out of the automatic judgment, I think that's a good way to just preface it, like going out of the normal judgment of this is always bad, this is always good. I think to just hold it lightly.
Everything
right?
has sides, right?
Exactly.
So
yeah.
It's great if you are a person that wants to help other people. It would be better if you were able to choose, I'm not doing it for that dick. I'm just doing it for people that I love, or I'm doing it for people that behave a certain way.
And that's why I think it's so important to dive deeper into anything that can tell you more about yourself. And for me, human design has been a game changer, absolutely knowing more about what, how I function best and why I function in a certain way, and that it is so individual. And apart from the individual gifts that I bring to the table, there's also parts of me that are very easily manipulated and very open to conditioning. So then putting those two together and, putting a little bit of family trauma into the mix, you just go like, oh, okay. And here we have patterns that show up and that repeat, and that if I'm becoming really curious about them, I can actually get to know myself even more. And I think that's the invitation that this conversation for me is a beautiful representative of. Become really curious about yourself and see where it pulls you. And this is the one thing that I think stands out for me nowadays when I'm having these conversations. Not once did we mention spirituality, really.
No,
this is all science. This is all behavior science. This is all about just observation. So I want people that are watching this that have an aversion to spirituality and that think, let's put this into this one corner, to understand that this is not spiritual. Or even the other way around, people that say like, oh, but, I'm open to this because it's not. And I think those boundaries will meld more and more. We will witness this more and more, that people will not need the label of spirituality or energy work or whatever, and this will make our work a little easier, because you will get perceived and received from people that are not into that kind of stuff.
I've heard something that well, he's not a professional coach, not at all. He's a friend, and he just a couple of years ago he said something that I don't know where he's got that quote from. He probably has read it somewhere. He said for him, religion is something that comes from outside, and spirituality is something that comes from the inside. And thinking about that, and I've traveled quite some years. I've been in Mexico as well, where people are Well, actually, like the spiritual people of Mexico are super grounded and super earthy, and the tourists traveling to Mexico for spirituality, they're just like, not all of them, but some are just like gone, right? And I think this is an important phase again, because we do need to overstep things to immerse in stuff, to understand like, oh, this is too much, this is too little. Again,
You got to do what you do until you know what you're doing.
yeah, we need the body, we need the awareness of, is this just right, or is this my truth? Is this, am I aligned with that? You told me a little bit about your history, and there was also this, like at some point there was, oh yeah, this is my world, this is my tribe, and we all experience that, and at some point it's just like, something doesn't sit.
Yeah.
That's the definition of embodiment. Why is it good? Because we know what is too much, what is little. This is like our inner compass is,
and allowing yourself to change your mind about things.
Yeah, and it's also like, okay, now I've like come a step further, so now I see, I don't know, a bit of bigger picture. I have become different. I'm coming from a different point of view, and now this doesn't make sense anymore, and I wouldn't know that from my body. And so about the spirituality bit, like for me, the more I work with embodiment, the more spiritual I feel, as this, like spirituality being a part of being a human, as being a part of human experience. Is like, there's this, whenever I can practice, and lately I had to practice that quite a lot, acceptance, when I'm super stressed, or when I'm like, there is this like, okay, but I'm still on my way. Things are maybe difficult, but like, and I'm like, I'm certainly not doing everything perfectly, because I do have this complex life as well. And I have some tools that help me to not completely overexhaust myself, or to not like completely be a dick with other people, but and to like, okay, now I have to, like I said earlier, boundaries now, and I do that kindly. And I react, no, I take action earlier, so I don't become reactive. But huge part of the process is sitting there, accepting what's there, even accepting like we've been talking about going into our patterns, right? And these are not only that things are being done to us, we're always also being manipulators. We're always influencing other people. So especially working with other people, or maybe even being a parent, being a partner. How do I want to show up in any type of relationship? Be aware of how I am in that role. Like, take agency for that. Take ownership of like, how do I want to respond now? So making this visible as well, the downside that you just like mentioned even. So accepting like, oh, I hit my ego here. Oh, this is really, it's always uncomfortable. And it always leaves me with gratitude and with a sense of an alignment that feels somehow bigger than I am. It fills me with a space inside of me, like sensory experience of the space inside of me is almost too big to fit into my body.
Yeah. So how much are you invested in the restriction? I had this yesterday when I was feeling so off, that I was actually, I was sitting there and I was noticing, a tendency to deal with it. And then I was like, I can just get up and choose that I'm done. This would actually serve everybody in this situation now if I just choose to let it be. And it really worked. And collecting new references, I think that's also such a huge part in this, to say, like, if I keep observing a little bit, I'm having a difficult time mentioning free will here, because I have my personal take on this. There might be an episode on that at some point, but I always have the choice. Where do I put my focus? How do I want to behave right now? And I want to keep, I hold myself to a high standard. I want to keep surprising myself too.
Yeah. So
in a good way.
We need to practice having a choice, right? Like in theory, we always have a choice. Factually, as long as I am in a reactive state, I don't have choice.
Exactly.
Like biology just like doesn't allow me for that. And again, there's always a moment after, and there is some brains that I have, and maybe some conversations. And whoever listens to this now, please be aware that you can make decisions now for tomorrow. You can decide to learn something, to do something about it. People that say, oh yeah, I'm working on doing that differently, and then a mentor would ask them, like in a workshop, like, so how do you work on it? Well, I intend to. It's not working.
No.
You're doing nothing. You're not doing anything.
In episode 1, in episode 1, I talked to my friend Amar, and he said the same thing. Like, if you're okay waking up to the same life every day, just keep doing what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
But don't tell me, oh, I'm going to stop smoking, or, like I really want to, but it's not, then you don't. And that's a whole other conversation. I can really feel that we
Yeah.
could go down so many rabbit holes, Vanessa.
Yeah. So
This is
choice comes with
fantastic.
awareness, right?
Yeah.
All comes back to that with awareness and then practice. We need other strategies. We need alternative behavior. So we can choose to not do the one behavior that we know. And that is practicing in the body. The same way that I practice how to ride a bike. I need to know how it feels to be stable. I need to know how it feels to be on a different ground. I need to practice all these things to experience so I can start managing and handling that. And it is a bit bulky. It feels easily bulky in the beginning, like, oh, how do I do this all like very formally? But we very easily, the body just like takes it, and
Yeah.
body loves to be more relaxed.
Yeah,
Or
and
loves
that's
to be more
the
relaxed.
trusting that there's this navigative system that basically has you covered. Like the more you hand over control, the better the body can step in with its
Yeah.
intelligence. And I would just, I think my advice would be for somebody who says like, okay, but I don't even know where to start. Like, I have no clue. I just say take a weekend or take like a couple of days where, maybe you're not in such high demand, and just start paying attention.
Yeah.
Just start paying attention. And maybe, if you're the journaling type, write about it. If you're, if you want to leave yourself a voice note on your phone or whatever, just start keeping track of it
Yeah.
and see how your life can shift with the very small changes of saying like, I tried for a day, and even just taking one choice that feels a little bit out of my realm to just go there and say, not much can happen if I just do it. I always like to work with the comfort zone, like there's no growth in the comfort zone, but I still, even stepping outside of it, I still need to be in a kind of a safety zone. So always make sure, push the boundaries of the comfort zone, but don't push the boundaries of the safety zone so
Yeah.
much.
And also come back, right? Push them and come back. It's like,
Yeah.
it's a bit like Jamie Cato, another one of my teachers. He sometimes, I think he refers to this a little bit differently than I will do now. But if you have a ball and you press it underwater, that's you
Yeah.
add tension and you let go, it will not go to surface. It will just like
Yeah.
go a little bit up. So to avoid that happening, you will have to take it out a little bit, right? I mean, you could like basically carry it there, and okay, picture doesn't work completely perfectly here, but it's basically you have to like rebalance that. You cannot always be on your edge. So
Yeah.
spaces of nourishment. There's one thing, and again, coming back to how important is embodiment for trauma. And you said already having reference points. Every time I practice, and practice is nothing that I do with my kid or my partner or my boss. Practice is something that I do in a space that is contained, that is non-consequential, and that I can calibrate. I certainly cannot go to my kid or to my boss or probably my partner and say, can you please be 20% annoying because I'm learning something here? It doesn't work, right? But so that's practice. That's also what it's really useful to do that with a coach, to get out of your own bullshit that you tell yourself, because we lie to ourselves constantly. But it doesn't necessarily have to be coach. Could be to have a good like check-in points with someone outside of that. But the practice, every time I practice, from one vocabulary practice, I would say we reinforce the new neural pathways to create new behavior, or to create the availability for alternative behavior in our bodies. From another perspective, same truth, I can say I am proving myself that I am able to handle this tomorrow when I'm stressed more and more. Every time I practice, I will be this little time window that's not there. It's going to be there, and it's going to open up, and I will be like, oh, wait, I know this. I can still decide to go all the way in. I don't have to be Buddha, and I don't have to be super regulated, but I will be becoming better at spotting those moments and to create choice. So awareness, practice, and choice. And on this meta level, this is the root of self-confidence.
Yeah.
This is the root of I am becoming a person. I am observing that I am becoming a person that I can trust to deal with this tomorrow in a bit
Yeah.
better way.
It's
And, you know,
very, like I always say, it's a very selfish thing to do the
yeah, it
work.
is. It is.
It
It is.
is because, I know that life never fails to deliver challenges.
Yeah.
That's
And it's
just what
not
it is.
anything. Yeah.
And I want to be in a
Selfishness is not
position.
unkind, right?
Exactly. I
Selfishness.
want I
Yeah.
want to be in a position where I can meet those, right? And have that curious mindset. And it was interesting. My daughter said to me yesterday, she's like, when she's 20, so just not a small one, but she says, yeah, but isn't it great that you know how to deal with these things? And I'm like, how do you mean? She said, well, because you're a coach, right? Like you know how to deal with these things. And I thought, yeah, it's another way of holding myself accountable, really,
It does
because
make things easier. It's the more you see, the more you will see.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. It
Blessing
doesn't
is a
it
curse.
doesn't stop
Really.
giving,
Yeah.
absolutely. Shifting gears, because I know we could go on forever and
Yeah.
ever. And at some point I'll probably do season 2, and I'll re-invite all of my guests. Um, the sexy six questions I'm asking all of my guests, shooting out of the hip. Watch
So
that body
excited.
response.
I have no clue what's gonna come.
Good,
Okay.
good. What skill would you like to have?
What?
Skill would you like to have?
Oh, like a real one or a superhero
Doesn't
one?
matter.
Flying.
Flying.
Do I need to improve my superhero or my witchy skills? I'm not sure about that. No. What skill would I like to have? Um, I would like to be more more intentional with public speaking
Mhm.
because I tend to improvise a lot and I do a lot on the computer actually, and I would like to. I'm practicing actually to be better on stage presence and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and which actually brings me to a good point that I didn't mention earlier because we were so deep in our conversation. You are a 6-2 manifesting generator in human design, and that is crucial information when you say like I want to be more prepared or more intentional with my preparing myself or being on stage and talking from a more confident space. Like in a way, the 6 and the 2 are in a little bit of a battle. Like the 6 wants to make it up on the fly. The 2 is very comfortable with being natural, being like a natural genius at things. So there's some tension going on there. But yeah, I mean, we can always put our focus on improving. So
Yeah.
that's a great skill to have. I agree. Question number 2. If you could spend an hour with anyone, dead or alive or fictional, who would it be and what would you be doing?
So difficult. It would be a different answer every day for sure.
Yes, I guess.
Um, like actually, I think it would be with my mom and just
Oh.
being here and having a nice, I don't know, a nice dinner or something.
Hmm.
Because well, she's alive, she's well,
Yeah. Okay.
and yeah, I've just recently come back to Germany, so there has not been I've also recently become more and more comfortable with being like really close with some people of my family,
Hmm.
and especially with my mom. So there's sometimes like, well, when you heal, you push away. Oh,
Hmm.
I did that the way that's not true for everyone, but I think I just want to have more moments that are relaxed and where we're not both overworked and
Hmm.
having. Yeah, I think we need some more, even if it's shopping or something, shopping and a coffee with my mom. We did
Oh.
that a couple of years ago. Her birthday is in November.
Hmm.
So what I did was I gifted her a very cheap ticket to some European city, usually was somewhere in Italy. And then for Christmas, it was the first night in an Airbnb that was on me. And then we always did like this one weekend trip in February or something.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
love that, like
Yeah.
it's a very It's a great reminder because it's a very low hanging fruit, right? To really, it doesn't need to be some crazy ass imagination. It could just be, you know, becoming more close with the people in our lives.
Yeah, I'm doing so much research and reading and having so many fabulous and smart people that are, I feel constantly inspired by what I hear and learn around myself. So I'm blessed enough to have this environment that
Hmm.
like, is just there, or that has evolved there. But yeah, I think this time is a bit too short.
Yeah, we'll do a night podcast at some point. Um, what's your favorite book or movie or song of all time? It doesn't need to be all three.
I will say Two Shoes from the Cat Empire. It's a song that I very much love. It's a band from, well, you can just like look it up. It's a fabulous song. And it's
Say what it's called again and by who?
the Cat Empire is the band. And
Mm-hmm.
they're from Australia.
Mm-hmm.
And Two Shoes is the song. And it's
Two Shoes by the Cat
Two Shoes.
Empire.
Yeah.
Never heard of it. I need to look
It's
that one
really
up.
nice.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I don't know. It got to me somehow. Like
Yeah,
we all have a million favorite songs, don't we?
I
But
know, I know. This is not an easy one. It's not supposed to be an easy one.
no,
Next question. If you were president of the world, what would your first law that you would implement be?
meditate. I hate meditation, but there is a form, like I'm a meditation facilitator. I've become that because I do hate meditation because
Hmm.
I cannot sit still easily.
Hmm.
And there are so many ways to meditate that are not feeling like shit in the body. And I think it's yeah, it's not possible to find a way to do that, to practice that, and to stay reactive or unethical.
Hmm.
I think this would solve a lot of things. I can't believe I just said meditation.
Ah,
I don't even like the experience.
I love it. I love that. I love that. But it would definitely contribute to a more peaceful world and environment. So that's
Yeah,
great.
that's nice.
Now, last question. What's your most controversial opinion?
Mm. I talk about choice and freedom a lot, and you mentioned something like free will.
Hmm.
And, well, I don't have a clear opinion on that, but even just doubting that there is
Hmm.
really free will, or that it's like, I think we have a free will to mess up stuff. And on the other hand, there's so much I learned about conditioning, about
Hmm.
also about timing that we don't have any influence on, about stuff that I would never learn in any school, probably,
Hmm.
that I just found to be true for myself. And that is more of a very fuzzy, felt, visceral experience or knowledge, maybe, that I orient towards many times that I don't have any evidence for, other than my intuition. And this is the best way for me to deal with stuff. So I am not sure if I really have a free will in all senses, or if there's just something that maybe there is some really clear path and a really clear purpose, and my job is to find that. And I mean, like, if you think about this, it's not even a contrasting thing, because if there is some inner truth for me that's true, if there is a purpose that I can find, how would I ever have a really free will? It doesn't even make sense to think about this, because
I
the only
agree.
choice I have, choice, right? But the choice that I had was follow this, like find this, be courageous enough to find this, and to always check back in with that, or to be unhappy. And then I can say, stay on the
And
path.
then the
Learn what you
experience will come around in a different
yeah,
costume, in a
yeah.
different
Unless I get like
way.
unless I really like numb myself violently, which I've tried, it doesn't work. Like I've tried so badly to fit in.
Mm.
I've tried so badly. Like I've numbed so much unhappiness in my life with wine, and like I didn't do hard drugs, but like I did my things, and it was never enough to not have this inner voice inside that was just like, so, there's something you need to like, we got to stop this now, we got to go this way. And
Yeah.
I don't even know why I went to Argentina. I always wanted to, I don't know, I never wanted to go there. And this thing that some call their calling, yeah, it's
not what it looks like. Yeah.
It's also nothing that I teach people, because I feel that if people experience that, then they should experience, they will find, they
And
couldn't
it's so personal.
avoid. It's so personal.
It's so
They will find their
personal.
language, they will find it with whatever resonates with them, and
Yeah.
it will be so personal. But like for me, for my own truth, I don't know if my job is maybe to follow something. And I'm not religious, and I wouldn't even know if I would have to call it anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's quite intimate.
That's what I do.
Yeah, you've never said that publicly. Wow.
It's recorded.
Good.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was a great conversation, and I know that there's so much more that I'm curious about in the way that you work. We have briefly talked about possibly doing something together at some point, other than this podcast. So I'm really happy that you are in my orbit. I'm glad that I got to share you with my universe. And now, because you are one of my dear connections, you get to decide who I speak with next. And I'm really curious to hear who would you recommend for me to speak with.
Yes, I would. I would love if you would meet with Shayla. There's so many amazing women in my life. Many of them are colleagues, so people that I found through the workshops that I connected with. And Shayla is someone that I met someone last year, first time in London during a workshop of Mark's. She's also one of Mark's students. Then I got to, I assisted on that workshop, so we didn't connect really privately, but just the vibe of the person was, she is something strong and gentle at the same time. And we went into an Uchideshi with Mark, which is kind of like a 5-day immersion, like living and working with the teacher, basically. So we were the students, and we had one whole place in his house, and we got to get mentored quite a lot, and like take walks with him, and experience how it is to live the life like this. It's a different way of learning. And so we connected fairly well there, and became really good friends. And I mean, she does embodiment coaching. She has this, it's so different. She's a mother. She's considerate, she's kind, she's warm. She would always be like very, very gentle, very intuitive, very connected to herself, very much in tune with what is the good thing to do here, what is the kind thing to do. Oh, that doesn't sit comfortable, like I'm not comfortable with doing that. And she's such an inspiration for me with
That's
that.
awesome. I'm really looking forward to meeting her. What question do you want to leave for her?
I would like, because I'm me, I would like her to commit to something, one more workshop that she does. No matter if she's relatively new in the coaching thing, and she does some things, and I know she has started a new profession or a new commitment, like work-wise, which is taking so much of her time, and she has this beautiful son, and she does work with embodiment stuff. She does give workshops, and I just wanted to commit to do one more thing, and to think about like what that could be this year.
Okay. So I'll ask her the question,
Yes.
What's the next workship that you'll do?
Yes, please
okay.
do.
Okay, I'm curious.
Okay.
What's next for you, and where can people find you?
Next to me is the radio show with your sister.
We haven't even touched upon that.
On Monday. Unfortunately, for many people, it's in German. Sorry for your ears.
Yeah, we'll link it in the show notes, definitely. And yeah, another Rocketwoman radio.
Yes, we call the show Body, Mind, Business. And it's exactly about like how to get stuff done without overworking yourself, how to have a fulfilling, how do I call it in English? It makes sense in German. I say, I won't say it in German now, but there's something about like how to burn for something without burning out, basically. And it's for everyone who is interested in self-leadership and work environments that enable sustainable good life, basically.
Yeah, so important. Yeah. So important. So we'll link that in the show notes. And that's a monthly thing that you do?
That's for now it's monthly. I want to add a second one with just me and some people that I meet along the way that have something to share about leadership and this type of thing that we talked about in the beginning about the new work, pretty much that world, everything that's relevant about that. And we're still very much in the beginning, so we're kind of like finding the exact tone of how we and what we do, but there's a little bit of a punk in that. So we basically want to like grab the box with the buzzwords and shake it through and see what has substance in that world. And other than that, I am more or less noisy on LinkedIn, which is a good thing to follow. And if you want to work with me, or if you just want to know more about like, could I be good for telling your boss we need that person to show us how to do our job without hating it, let's have a chat. Right? That would be the things.
Yeah, awesome. Awesome. I'm really, really grateful that we got to spend this time together. I think there were so many impulses that I'll definitely take into my contemplations. And I hope that, our viewers were able to tap into this beautiful realm that opens up when you take that step into self-observation and just get curious about whatever your body wants to tell you. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your wisdom. And I know we'll see each other again.
Thank you. Thanks to all my teachers. And like that includes my mom and all friends along the way and colleagues and you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
It's a moment of gratitude. Thank you so much.
Always.
Yeah. Thanks everybody for watching. Bye. Thanks for tuning into the Rocketwoman Show. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please like and subscribe, leave a comment and share it with your universe. We can always inspire each other's orbits. All episodes are available on YouTube and Spotify, and new ones are always released on a Friday. For updates, you can find me on Instagram at The Rocketwoman Show, and if you're interested in my work as a guidance coach, I work with human design, the gene keys, astrology, and plenty of other intuitive wisdom that I've collected over the past 20 years. So if that resonates, go and check out my website, thezencubator.com, or follow the Zen Cubator on Instagram or Facebook. I wish you a magical week and hope to welcome you back next time.